All right, so are opportunity zones actually working? I mean, you look at all this research, and who has time to read through all of it? That's why we're doing this deep dive.
Yeah, breaking it all down.
So just a reminder for everyone listening, opportunity zones are low-income communities, and they get special status so they can hopefully get some economic revitalization. It's all about these tax breaks. If you're an
Ah.
investor and put money into these areas, you get a nice tax break. Sounds great in theory, but is it actually working?
Well, the report we're looking at is from Atune. They're a real estate data company, and they looked at home prices in almost 4,000 opportunity zones all across the U.S. And they were looking specifically at Q3 of 2024.
So what's the big takeaway? What really stands out in the report?
One of the interesting things is that home prices in these opportunity zones are basically following the same trends as the rest of the country.
Yeah, I was thinking that kind of makes sense. Like, isn't everything kind of connected?
Yeah, but it's a little more complicated than that. Yeah, think about it. These zones, they usually have had a really tough time economically. So if the whole country's market starts doing bad, these areas could be hit harder than everywhere else.
Right. And take longer to bounce back.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're not totally protected from those big market swings,
Hmm.
even with the tax breaks. But didn't the report also say that prices went up a lot in some of the zones? Like in more than half of them, prices went up more than 10% each year? That sounds like a pretty good thing, right?
It does. And it could be that those tax breaks are doing what they're supposed to, attracting investors and creating some momentum. But, and this is a big but, most of the opportunity zones still have much lower home values than the national average.
But it's not like some huge success, like some people might hope. We can't just look at prices going up
Yeah,
and assume that everyone's doing great.
exactly. Higher property values don't always mean that the people living there actually have better lives.
Right.
We have to look deeper.
So if rising home prices aren't the whole story, what else do we need to look at? How do we really know if these investments are making life better for the people who actually live in these communities?
Well, we have to look beyond just housing. What about jobs? Are new businesses opening up? Are things like roads and bridges and internet getting better? Things like that can really change a community.
Right. It's not just about property values going up. It's about making the whole place better for everyone. But how do we know if that's happening? Like, it seems a lot harder to measure that than just looking at home prices.
It is. We need to take a much broader look. For example, we can look at what kind of businesses are opening. Are they offering jobs that pay well? Jobs with benefits? Are they hiring people from the community? Are they actually helping the economy of the community overall?
So it's not just about how many jobs. It's about what kind of jobs. We need to see investments that are creating real opportunities, not just short-term gains, or benefits for people from outside the community.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the downsides of development that happens too fast. What about gentrification? If prices go way up, are people who've lived there a long time getting pushed out because they can't afford it anymore?
That's a great point. Any efforts to make things better have to include everyone and benefit everyone, not just newcomers with lots of money.
Absolutely.
So how do we make sure that happens? It seems like there's a big risk that these investments could actually make things worse for the people who already live there.
Yeah, there is. That's why we need to have things in place to protect people. Things like policies that encourage affordable housing, support for small businesses, programs to help residents build wealth and share in the prosperity.
So it's about making sure development is fair and that it helps the people who already live there instead of pushing them out.
Exactly. And that means doing things carefully and taking into account the needs and challenges of each community.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. Each opportunity zone is different, with its own strengths and weaknesses, and its own vision for the future.
Yeah, definitely. To really understand whether these zones are working, we have to look at them one by one and think about their specific situation and the impact these investments are having on the people who live there.
So we've established that just looking at home prices isn't enough. We need to look at the bigger picture. Jobs, businesses, and how these communities are doing overall. But how do we measure all of that? Where do we even start?
Well, there's a ton of data out there, but it can be hard to find and make sense of. We need to look at things like how many people have jobs, how many businesses are starting, how much money people are making, and whether people have access to things like healthcare and good schools. And probably most importantly, we need to listen to the people who live in these communities. What are they experiencing? Are their lives getting better? Are they actually feeling the benefits of these investments?
That's a really important point. Numbers can tell us a lot, but they don't tell the whole story. We need to hear from the people who are actually living it to really understand what's going on. So let's look at some specific examples from the ATTOM report and see how these trends are playing out in real communities.
One thing that really jumped out at me in the ATTOM report was how much home prices changed in a lot of these opportunity zones. Just between the second and third quarters of this year.
Oh, yeah. How, like, almost three-quarters of the zones they looked at saw prices either go down or jump up by at least 5%.
Yeah,
Oh, that's interesting.
right. That much change in such a short time really makes you think. It shows just how sensitive these markets are, especially because they've had so many economic problems in the past.
It's like they're trying to walk a tightrope, trying to grow, but also really vulnerable to any sudden changes.
That's a good way to put it. And it shows why it's so important to look beyond these short-term ups and downs and focus on creating growth that's sustainable.
Right, because just because home prices spike up for a bit doesn't mean that the community is going to be better off in the long run.
That's right. We need to ask ourselves, are these investments building a solid foundation for success? Or are they just creating these bubbles that could easily burst?
And another thing the report mentioned was that a lot of these zones have really low sales volume.
Yeah, that's a really important point. When you only have a few houses being bought and sold, it only takes a couple of really high-priced sales or a couple of really low-priced sales
Yeah.
to completely change the average value.
Right. It's like trying to decide if you like a whole basket of apples.
Yeah.
Based on just taking one bite,
Yeah.
you get a totally wrong idea.
Exactly. We need a bigger sample size, more data to really understand what's going on in these markets.
So how do we go beyond just the numbers and really understand how opportunity zones are affecting people's lives? Are there any stories from specific places that show us what's happening?
Well, the ATTOM report doesn't really do that. They're not focused on specific places. They're more about looking at the big picture and seeing overall trends across the whole country.
Okay, so no like success stories or cautionary tales from individual communities.
No, not really.
It's more about understanding the overall trends.
Right. And I think that's important because it avoids this idea that all opportunity zones are the same or that they're all doing well or all struggling.
Right, because each community is different.
Exactly. They each have their own challenges and opportunities.
So we can't just make these big general statements.
Right. What works in one place might not work in another. And just because something looks good on paper doesn't mean it's actually making people's lives better.
So how do we go beyond the data and really understand what it's like to live in these communities?
I think it starts with listening to the people who live there, talking to community leaders, residents, business owners, and other people who are involved to find out how these investments are affecting them directly.
Are they seeing more job opportunities? Are things like roads and schools getting better? Are they feeling more hopeful about the future? Those are the kinds of questions we need to be asking.
Exactly. Data can tell us a lot, but it can't tell us everything. We need to hear from the people on the ground to get the full picture.
And we need to remember that there can be downsides too.
Right.
Like our property values going up so much that people are being forced out of their homes, our longtime residents getting priced out of their own neighborhoods. These are really important things to think about.
Absolutely. And it means asking some tough questions. Are the people who already live here benefiting from these investments? Or are we just seeing richer people moving in without really improving things for the people who are already here?
Because the goal should be to make things better for everyone,
Right.
not just for a small group of people.
It's about creating communities that are strong and healthy, where everyone has a chance to succeed.
Okay, so we've talked about the need to look beyond just home prices and think about the bigger impact of opportunity zones on jobs, businesses, and the community as a whole. But let's dive a little deeper into some of the specific areas that the report highlighted, like job creation. How do we know if these investments are actually leading to good jobs for people?
One way to tell is to look at the kinds of businesses that are moving into these zones. Are they industries that usually offer jobs that pay well, with benefits, jobs that give people a chance to move up?
So it's not just about how many jobs are created, but what kind of jobs they are.
Exactly. We need to see jobs that can support families, jobs that help people feel secure, and that contribute to a stable economy for the whole community.
And what about the businesses that are already there? Are they benefiting from these investments too? Or are they getting pushed out by new competition?
That's a really important question. Ideally, we want to see these investments helping all businesses, not just replacing existing businesses with new ones.
So how do we make sure that happens? Are there ways to help both new and existing businesses in these zones?
Definitely. Things like making sure small businesses have access to money, offering training and support, and giving businesses incentives to hire people from the local community. All of these can make a big difference.
So it's about creating an environment where everyone can succeed and where the benefits of these investments are shared by everyone.
Exactly. It's about creating a sense of shared prosperity.
Okay, so we've talked about jobs and businesses, but what about the overall well-being of these communities? How do we measure the impact on things like how connected people feel to their community,
Yeah.
safety, and just how happy and healthy people are overall?
That's where things get a little more complicated, but it's still super important. We have to look at things like crime rates, how easy it is to get health care and education,
Yeah.
and whether people feel proud of their community and feel like they belong.
Because in the end,
Mm.
the goal is to create communities that are doing well in every way, not just economically,
Yeah.
but also socially. Places where people feel safe and connected and have the opportunity to live a good life.
Absolutely.
So as we continue talking about opportunity zones, let's keep those things in mind. It's not just about money. It's about creating communities that are thriving in every sense of the word.
Well said. And I think it's important to remember that this is all a process. We need to keep gathering information, listening to what people are saying, and making changes along the way to make sure that these investments are really making a positive impact.
Because whether opportunity zones succeed or not depends not just on how much money is invested, but on how thoughtfully those investments are made.
Exactly. And on our commitment to working together to create a fairer and more prosperous future for everyone.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore. What other aspects of opportunity zones should we be paying attention to?
You know, one area that often gets overlooked is infrastructure. Things like transportation, utilities, and access to high-speed internet. Those are all crucial for economic development. You're right, it's easy to get caught up in big investments. But good infrastructure is like the foundation of a building. You can't really build anything that lasts without it.
It's true. And you have to think about it from the perspective of the people who live there. Like imagine trying to get to a job interview, but you don't have a reliable way to get there. Or you're trying to run a business. So it's not enough to just give tax breaks. We need to think bigger. Opportunity zones have to be about more than just attracting money. We need a more comprehensive approach to community development, one that addresses the underlying problems that are holding these areas back.
I agree. We need a change in how we think about this. We need to move away from this idea of rescuing these communities and towards a model of empowerment and collaboration.
What do you mean by that?
Well, instead of coming in with solutions from the outside, we need to involve the residents in the process. Ask them what they need, what their vision for the future is. Use their knowledge of the community and their expertise.
It's about recognizing that the people who live there are the ones who really know what will work.
Exactly. And it's about trusting them to be part of making things better.
So if we're thinking about long-term success for opportunity zones, what should we be looking for? What are the signs that these investments are actually making a difference?
Well, the most important thing is, are people's lives getting better? Are incomes going up? Is poverty going down? Are people feeling more optimistic about the future?
Those are the things that really matter. But how do we know if those changes will last? How do we make sure things don't just go back to how they were once the investments stop?
That's where community ownership is so important. Are residents taking on leadership roles? Are they starting businesses? Are they investing in their own communities? Are they building the capacity to keep this progress going?
It's about creating a sense of shared responsibility, a feeling that this is our community and we all have a stake in its future.
Exactly. And that kind of energy is what really leads to lasting change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What should they remember about opportunity zones?
I think the most important thing to remember is that opportunity zones have a lot of potential, but they're not a quick fix. They're a tool. And like any tool, they can be used well, or they can be used poorly.
It all depends on how they're implemented and whether the investments are truly aligned with the needs of the community.
Exactly. And it's up to all of us, policymakers, investors, community leaders, and residents, to work together to make sure that these initiatives are successful and that they create a more just and equitable future for everyone.
I completely agree. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep learning about this topic, keep asking questions, and keep talking about how we can create stronger and more inclusive communities.
Because ultimately, this is about more than just numbers and statistics. It's about people's lives, their dreams, their hopes for the future. And we all have a role to play in making that future a better one.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep working towards a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.